In his essay Postmodernism or the Cultural Logic of Late Capitalism, Frederick Jameson discusses the idea of pastiche. Pastiche, like parody, imitates other styles and forms, but unlike parody, it lacks a critical or humorous intent. It simply mimics without aiming to mock or satirize. According to Jameson, in postmodern culture, pastiche has replaced parody. This means that the imitations seen in postmodernism are neutral and lack deeper critique. However, Jameson believes that some form of parody still exists in postmodernism, though it may be unconscious. Eagleton argues that postmodernism often parodies the revolutionary art of the early 20th century avant-garde. The avant-garde aimed to merge art with social and political life, breaking down the boundaries between them. In contrast, postmodernism takes the ideal and distorts it, stripping it of its revolutionary spirit and turning it into something trivial and commercial. For example, while avant-garde artists like Mayakovsky might have integrated poetry with everyday life and political action, postmodernism reduces such efforts to mere commodities like Warhol's famous images of shoes and soup cans. This transformation is seen as a cynical twist by mainstream culture on the original revolutionary intent. Jameson also argues that postmodern art is often superficial and lacks depth. Unlike modernist art, which sometimes express deep alienation or critique, postmodern art is detached and indifferent. It does not aim to alienate or provoke because there is no longer a sense of what is authentic to contrast with. For example, placing a pile of bricks in a gallery could be ironic once, but repeating it shows a lack of any deeper intention. Postmodernism lacks the historical memory to make such gestures meaningful. Jameson claims that postmodernism parodies the socialist utopia by creating a world where alienation is supposedly abolished. In reality, postmodernism has made alienation so pervasive that it has become invisible. Everything appears normal because the standards to recognize alienation have been erased. To view art as the avant-garde did, not as an institutionalized object but as a practice, strategy, performance and production, is grotesquely caricatured by late capitalism. Lyotard pointed out that the performativity principle is paramount in this context. In his work The Postmodern Condition, Lyotard highlights capitalism's massive subordination of cognitive statements to the best performance. He notes that scientific language games have become the games of the wealthy, where the wealthiest have the best chance of being right. This situation reveals a clear relation between J.L. Austin's philosophy and IBM or the various neo-Nietzscheanisms of the post-structuralist epoch and Standard Oil. The classical models of truth and cognition are losing favor in a society where delivering commercial or rhetorical goods matters most. The goal has shifted from truth to performativity, from reason to power. The Institute of Directors exemplifies spontaneous post-structuralism, disenchanted with epistemological realism and the correspondence theory of truth. This recognition does not suggest a return to John Locke or Lukács, but acknowledges the difficulty in distinguishing politically radical assaults on classical epistemology from reactionary ones. Lyotard himself offers only an anarchist version of the capitalist performativity principle, advocating for paralogism to disrupt the system occasionally. This pragmatism is ultimately a losing battle, abandons the grand narrative of human emancipation from the Enlightenment. Lyotard argues that in advanced societies, socialist struggles have become part of the system rather than opposing it. He questions how unconventional scientific experience could challenge capitalism if class struggle doesn't. doesn't. Jameson suggests that in postmodern times, science disrupts the system in the way that high modernist art once did. Lyotard sees modernism and postmodernism as continuous, both shaking up history with the force of the present moment, avoiding the traditional sense of time. Paralogism or illogical reasoning remains constant, just like the system it disrupts. The concept of modern is timeless and disrupts historical timelines. Modernism, like anarchistic revolt, never truly ends but also cannot defeat the system. This paradox fuels a mix of pessimism and euphoria in post structuralism. History and modernity constantly clash without overcoming each other, playing out in different realms. Modernity, as Nietzsche described it, actively forgets history, while Walter Benjamin's revolutionary nostalgia calls upon oppressed traditions to challenge the present. Lyotard's celebration of narrative as an eternal present contrasts with Benjamin's historical awareness, blending grand narratives of the Enlightenment with postmodern micropolitics. Benjamin's thoughts on history complicate this binary, mixing totality with fragmentation and tradition with deconstruction. Paul the Man, an American deconstructionist, reflects a Nietzschean idea of modernity with irony. Modernist efforts to erase history end up perpetuating it. Literature tries to renew itself but cannot escape the influence of history. Dayman argues that modernism's dream of starting new is self-defeating because it disrupts tradition while relying on it. We are both modernists and traditionalists, with literature showcasing this dilemma. Dayman views literature's history as symbolic of history overall, maintaining radical political illusions while being inherently self-defeating. This skepticism leads to a liberal stance that tolerates radical actions without fully embracing them. The debate on history and modernity touches on the relationship between theory and practice. Neo-Nietzschean practice, seen as error or blindness, makes theory a reflection on its own impossibility. Literature, intertwining truth and error, becomes both practice and its deconstruction. Dayman extends this idea to historical knowledge, criticizing Marxism's belief in theoretically informed actions and emancipatory histories. His Nietzsche sees practice as self-deceptive and tradition as obstructive, aligning with Alter's idea of practice as imaginary. Dayman is cautious about the possibilities of modernist experiments, seeing literature as a perpetually frustrated attempt at modernism. Modernist works acknowledge their own impotence, knowing that institutionalization is inevitable. This self-aware impotence reflects the post-structuralist stalemate between law and desire, with revolutionary fervor diminishing under restrictive conditions. Dayman's focus on modernism, seen as a silent critique of Marxism, prompts reconsideration of the term's meaning. Perry Anderson argues that modernism lacks clear positive content, signifying a self-conscious historical moment marked by crisis and change. Modernism experiences the present with a focus on the future, often depicted through images of chaos and disruption. High modernism, emerging with mass commodity culture, tries to resist commodification by making art complex and unconventional. However, this autonomy leads to fetishism, escaping one form of commodification only to fall into another. Modernism's contradictions eventually lead to its failure, isolating it from real social and political change. Political modernism, like Brecht's work, is rare. Postmodernism, on the other hand, embraces its status as a commodity, blending seamlessly with everyday commodified life and turning high modernist autonomy into commonplace reification. Postmodernism halts at celebrating hits, unlike Brecht's Marxist approach, which seeks progress even from ambiguity. By embracing kitsch, postmodernism abandons historical standards of approval or criticism. It values the present moment of its own sake, disregarding history. This rejection of deep interpretation is evident in Deleuze and Guattari's Anti-Oedipus, where desire reigns supreme and interpretation is deemed unnecessary. Their metaphysical positivism clashes with the political need to understand desire, illusion with chaos, revealing an anarchist streak. In postmodernist theory, capitalism is seen as a machine of desire, where various styles and objects gain emotional intensity. Lyotard suggests we function as bodies that conduct these intensities without needing to make declarations or take actions. This view, closer to the East or Walter Pater than the political engagement of Walter Benjamin, reflects a metaphysical positivism detached from political involvement. Modernism is intriguing because it constantly seeks meaning, pushing it back to traditional ways of understanding. These old methods, though outdated, still shape our perception of the world even as they lose their relevance. Walter Benjamin's reading of Franz Kafka illustrates how modernism inherits old ideological forms, questions them, and reveals their emptiness, yet still uses them to define negative realities. Modernism exposes a contradiction in the concept of the individual. The bourgeois humanist subject, seen as free, active, and autonomous, is both relevant and irrelevant in late capitalist society. Post-structuralist theorists often assume the unified subject is central to contemporary ideology and needs urgent deconstruction. However, late capitalism has already fragmented the subject more effectively than theoretical critics. Today's individual is not a unified agent, but a dispersed network of desires and consumer experiences lacking ethical depth and inner coherence. This fragmented subject suggests the triumph of postmodern culture, where the traditional unified individual is outdated. Yet the bourgeois humanist subject remains significant in some areas, such as fatherhood, which demands responsibility and autonomy, contrasting with the role of a consumer. The subject of late capitalism is a contradictory mix, navigating between different definitions of selfhood. Modernism occupies this contradictory space, maintaining a sense of inner experience while challenging traditional ideological terms. It reveals the limits of these terms through subjective experiences. They cannot encompass critically engaging with modern condition. This is the contradictory space we still inhabit, making valuable the post-structuralism that acknowledges we cannot simply abandon the metaphysical. The new post-metaphysical subject proposed by thinkers like Brecht and Walter Benjamin envision humanized revolutionary figure is both a useful metaphor and uncomfortably close to the faceless functionaries of advanced capitalism. Similarly, the avant-garde's break from bourgeois culture's contemplative individual aligns with bourgeois utilitarianism's laboring subject. We remain between the fading aura of the old humanist subject and the energizing yet repellent new shapes of the modern city. Postmodernism blends modernism and the avant-garde, using the fragmented self and integrating art into social life without critical distance or political engagement. This reveals formalism in radical art forms that equate deinstitutionalizing art with revolutionary change. A genuinely political art today could draw from both modernism and the avant-garde, but in a different way than postmodernism. Modernism's contradictions are political, but its escape from traditional rationality obscured this. An effective political art must present politics as part of a transformed rationality, or it will seem like part of the dead tradition modernism seeks to escape.